Right guys, I'm not one to usually blow my own horn, but sorry, that's really terrible. What I've managed to sort out, which was something which has been annoying me for quite a long time, which you probably heard in the previous videos. If you haven't looked at my previous videos, they're worth a look at. They're probably down the side with suggested videos, and I'll link to them at the end as well, and above and below. But what we've been having an issue with is something I spoke about in my last video, but it's actually something I put in the comments. What I said is there's a noise which has been annoying me for a while, and if there's anybody can work out what it is. Now, I have managed to work out what this noise is after about a year, which I'm really pleased with. So we're going to look at today the PCV system on the Willys Jeep, which stands for positive crankcase ventilation. So let's get into that then. So we know in a vehicle we've got the pistons running up and down inside the cylinders in here, and the pistons seal against the walls of the cylinders using piston rings. Now piston rings aren't a perfect system, of course, which is to be expected. When they get worn, some gases, the hot compression gases and combustion gases which are in the cylinders, blow by the sides of the piston rings, and when they blow by, what we've got then, as you guys know, down in the bottom there is your sump where your crankcase, your crankshaft runs, and your camshaft and everything. So those hot gases escape down into the sump where the oil lives, right at the bottom. Now the problem with the hot gases which come from the blow-by, from the combustion, is that they contain some water vapour. So when you start up your Jeep on a cold day, you get water vapour, don't you, coming out the exhaust? Well, just imagine all that amount of water goes down into the sump. And if that water goes into the sump, it mixes with the oil, and when it mixes with the oil, it produces sludge. Now sludge is something which used to be an issue, or more of an issue than it is today. Modern oils are, well, very refined in comparison to the World War II oils, and sludge is not such an issue. But we can still have sludge formation, and this, remember, this vehicle was created in World War II, so they had sludge was quite a problem. Farmers keep on coming past and asking me if the Jeep has broken down. As you can see, it's a lovely day in the UK and there's lots of people out driving around, so we'll just try to work through that and continue it. But what we're talking about was sludge had been a problem in the Jeep. So imagine you've got all those gases going down into the bottom, into the sump. Well, wouldn't it be good then, rather the water and all the moisture and the blow-by gases mixing with your oil and causing sludge, what you could do instead then is vent it out. So what they decided to do, the initial way of sorting this out, was on the side here is where this is the adjustment for the valve train, okay, hiding inside there. So why don't you just put a simple hole or a pipe which goes down and allows the gases to escape, so any blow-by gases go out to the atmosphere. That seems to be a great idea, doesn't it? But of course the problem with that is that little vent sprays out loads of oil and stink into the atmosphere, which is not great in the first place, and also it's not a very efficient system. You can also, for a Jeep or a vehicle which goes off-road, that little vent which goes down here, it's low down, so if you go in water, you can have a load of water going into your oil and into your engine, which is obviously not a good idea at all. The other thing is that system only draws out the gases, creates a Venturi effect, so as the wind rushes through here, it creates a low pressure at the opening to the pipe which would sit there, and that helps draw the gases out, okay? But that's great when you're going fast, but how fast does a Jeep go when it's going off-road? It doesn't go fast at all, does it? It goes very slowly, so you don't get much of a Venturi, you don't get much of a draw, so the gases can't be removed from in the sump there, so you're still getting sludge formation. So later on then they came up with a better system, and what they did then is we take our filtered air here, it comes through, goes across, some of it goes down to the carb, into the manifold and off into the engine. But look, we also tap some off here. Some of it comes in here, this is the oil filler stick, and the oil filler goes down into the sump as well. So you've got some air, clean air, coming from the air filter going down and into the sump. And what that does is then it mixes with the blow-by gases, so you've got an air supply coming in, mixes with the blow-by gases and comes out through, if we can see in the light, comes out there on the side of the valve adjustment area, okay? And then there's a pipe which leaks it up to a valve here which goes to the manifold. So what we've got then, guys, is an airflow or a crankcase ventilation, a positive crankcase ventilation of air coming in, going down through the sump, picks up the blow-by gases and all the water and moisture, comes up there, out there, and up into a valve. Now that valve is this valve here, and he's also sitting, the new one is sitting there on my Jeep, okay? And that valve is quite clever. So when a Jeep is just idling, we've spoken about manifold pressures and manifold vacuum, and we looked at that with a manifold gauge, and we know now that at idle you have a large vacuum in the manifold here, because not much air, the pistons are going up and down, they're drawing air in, but there's not much push going through, there's not a whole load of air going through. So the pressure from the push is low, so you get a high vacuum if you think about it. So there's a high vacuum in here. What that means, if you've got a high vacuum, you draw loads and loads of air through this system here, which would mean you'd be dumping at idle a huge amount of air into your manifold. And we know the mixture of the engine is controlled by the air-fuel ratio, okay? So if we're dumping a whole load of air into the manifold at idle, it means you'll get a really lean running engine, which is not what we want. So what we want to do is we want to block off the air supply when the engine is running at idle, and it's done with the PCV valve there. The PCV valve inside it has a little shuttle, and that shuttle, when the engine is at idle, is drawn in this direction here, and it blocks off the flow of air coming up through the pipe. So it pretty much blocks off the air. It lets a little bit through, but it blocks it off mostly. And then it has a spring in it which is done to a specific pressure. Specific pressure. So as the engine RPM increases and the manifold vacuum inside the vacuum decreases, because you've got more air coming through, more pressure in there because it's being pushed into the cylinders at high power, so there's less vacuum in the manifold here, the little spring allows it to come back, and it opens up the PCV valve, the little shuttling valve inside there, which allows lots more air to come through and ventilate. So there's lots of blow-by gas going past when the engine's running fast, and it blows it straight up there into the manifold. And once it's in the manifold, all that oily, horrible air goes into these cylinders, and it's burnt in the cylinders with the fuel coming from the carburetor. So that's how we get rid of all that stinky, nasty, wet air, just burning it in the cylinders instead. So that PCV valve then has a metered needle in it, let's call it a needle, sitting inside it, which can move forwards and backwards on a spring. When the engine is running at idle, there's a high vacuum, it draws the needle in, which shuts off the supply going through. But when the engine's running fast, the vacuum decreases, the spring pressure pushes back the little needle, and that allows a lot of air to come through. So that's how the PCV valve system works, and it's a good little system, really. They're used in modern cars and they seem to be pretty good. But of course, like everything on a Jeep, the PCV valve system has got to work, and over the years they can get gummed up because it's full of horrible oily air and it's sitting in your manifold there, so it can get gummed up, which will block it off, so it means that it doesn't work. Or it can get jammed open, so you've got, remember at idle we said we didn't want a lot of air coming through because we haven't got much blow-by going on. So you can have a whole leak of air going into your manifold then, so your carburetor will always run too lean, so you have all sorts of issues here trying to get with the idle, trying to get it to idle correctly, because it'll be running too lean. So you can see that the operation of the PCV valve, guys, is very important. So it's something I'd neglected, I suppose. What I did with my PCV valve when I took it off is I checked it inside. Well, I poked it, made sure that the little shuttling valve could move and it wasn't blocked off, and I called that a day, cleaned it up and put it in. But of course, over 70 years of use, we know that a PCV valve and everything on a Jeep gets worn out, which is not ideal, and it'll stop working correctly. And that's the problem I've been having. And so, let us come to the problem I had with the ticking noise. So I had to search for a ticking noise in the engine. Now, ticking noises, of course, we're all going to think it's going to be valves. They go up and down quickly, they tick. It's got to be valves. It could be the adjusters on the tappets. So that's the sort of area I was looking in, and the noise was coming from in this area here. So if I put my head down, if I was over here, I couldn't hear it. If I put my head here, I could hear it just about here. So it could be the carburetor. So at the bottom of the carb, we've got the throttle butterfly, okay, and you know it's a butterfly which sits in there, and it sits on a shaft. Now if these screws are loose on the throttle butterfly, if you imagine the throttle butterfly sitting on the shaft like this, it can waggle around. So what would happen then is, as the pressure decreased and increased in the engine, as the pistons went up and down, you could expect to hear that throttle butterfly moving around at the same time as well, making a tick 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 noise. So I had a look at that seemed fine. I didn't think it was the valve train because I had changed all the valve guides, put new valves in there, new tappets, I'd adjusted the tappets twice, and the noise also came very regularly as well. It wasn't, if it was just a single valve, it would be going tick, 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 or maybe a little bit faster. But this one was ticking all the time, as you can hear. There you go. So that ticking all the time then means that it was happening on every combustion cycle. So it was happening on every single cylinder, which wouldn't really make sense. If it was a valve adjustment, it would probably just be one valve which was out, or a damaged valve, or a spring, weak spring, or something like that. You'd expect to hear it occasionally, not all the time. So it had to be something which was occurring all the time. There's limited things that can do that, really. We've already talked about the butterfly. I couldn't think of too many other ideas with this one, guys. I wasn't sure what was going on. It was a very metallic noise. But once we started looking at the vacuum gauge with the Jeep, started to think about how the manifold pressure works. And when I retarded the when I retarded the distributor on the Jeep and the vacuum manifold decreased, the noise went away. And you can hear that here. It's bogging down. So it's really bogging down now. So that noise decreasing gave me an idea that it was related to manifold pressure. And the thing which is related to manifold pressure is this little guy here, the PCV valve. So that's what was causing the issue, guys. It was the PCV valve. And I'd asked online and looked online because I couldn't hear this noise anywhere. When you search on YouTube for L134 noise and things like that, it comes up with the occasional tappet noise, it comes up with valve noise, things like that, but never that regular ticking that I had with the PCV valve on mine. So I was really pleased to have worked that out, because that noise was starting to really get to me and not being able to work out what it was. So all I had to do, guys, was take him off, buy a reproduction. I would like to get an original, buy a reproduction and replace him over, and the noise is gone, as they say. So that is that, guys. That's the PCV valve system in the Jeep. We'll take apart that PCV valve and have a look inside it and see what's going on and see how it's broken. I reckon inside it the spring is broken, which is meaning that it's not working, and the little needle which is in there is shuttling backwards and forwards at high speed as the vacuum pressure changes with each compression and combustion stroke in the manifold there. So that's what I think's wrong with it, but we'll look at that and see what we can find. For getting stuff apart, guys, which is really rusted together, the best way to do that is with a lot of heat, actually. So when you heat stuff up, it obviously expands, and things expand at different rates. And what that means is when there's a gap, such as a thread on here, if you heat it up really hard and then hit it with a load of WD-40, it's going to have expanded and suddenly contracted. And when it does that, bits which were rusted together, they suddenly separate. And so you can remove parts which have been together for years, which you would never be able to get apart if they were cold. You know, you'd wreck them if you tried to take them apart when they were cold. But when they're warm, you can easily, if I can get the, where are you? There we go. See, look at that. That would never have come apart without any heat on it. So heating stuff up and then cooling it rapidly often helps break apart rusty bits really easily. So here he is, guys, out, ready to go. So this end here is from the valve cover, and this end goes to the manifold here, and you've got markings on it which show where to go. So let's undo him and see what we've got inside. Whole load of carbon and oil. Okay, oh, there's the end, very shiny. And there is the little valve which lives in there. It's looking very dished, and this end is looking pretty dished as well, actually, to me. So let's get him out. See if this spring is broken. Oh, there we go. That's a specially shaped valve then. And there's a spring. It's looking all right. It's not very strong at all. I mean, that looks good. Look, there's a lot of wear. You can feel that there. It runs in on that ridge, and that end is very dished. Let's have a look. Let's see if we can clean him up a little bit. Yeah, that is that should be flat. And what about this end then, where it runs? I think what we're looking at here, guys, is just a very worn PCV valve. So with a weak spring, and it's worn so much that it's actually, you can see there's a wear line in there where it's run a ridge into it. Yeah, I don't think that's very healthy. So unfortunately, I think that's actually a PCV valve which is just worn out from 70 years of use. Because of this on the end here, I don't think that you could probably recover it, because if you machined it down, then the spring tension would be incorrect, and you'd have to replace the little valve inside it anyway. So yeah, I don't think that's particularly recoverable, guys. I think that is dead, and I think that's what was causing our PCV valve issues then. The fact that the PCV valve, it's not the spring is broken or anything like that, it's just literally worn out. But yeah, guys, that's it then, the PCV valve story. I'm really pleased with that. It's a strange problem to have. It's going to probably be fairly common, and it's something you should look at. If you've neglected your PCV valve or not thought about it, it's something you've got to look at, guys, because it is very important to how the fuel-air mixture works in the Jeep, and also the crankcase ventilation. So get it out, have a look at it, see if it's worn, see if your spring's broken. If it is, find a replacement for it and replace it. If it's gummed up, put it in some something to decoke it and remove all that oil, and then you'll have the system working again perfectly. If you've got a tapping noise, it should disappear and the engine should run better. I've found that the engine now is running very, very nicely. At speed, it's very smooth. It's almost like a modern car with a electronic ignition and everything, and in fuel injection. It feels the response is there. There's no sort of funny dying or anything like that. It's running really, really smoothly, so I'm pleased with it, guys. So as we can see, all the little things on a Jeep have got to work to make it run properly. The distributor, the carburetor, the setup, and also the PCV valve, as we found now. But yeah, guys, that's pretty much it then. I hope you're having a good day. It's another hot day in the UK at the moment. We're having a really nice summer. If you like these sort of videos, dog's going mad. If you like these sort of videos, have a look on my other videos, and like and subscribe and the little Jeep button in the corner. But I'll see you next time. Thanks, guys.